black man lay curled up under a bridge, his hair matted with dust, clutching a torn trash bag. The cops walked up. No questions. No reason. They started beating him. Boots to the face. Batons crashing down on his head. "You're scum," one of them spat. What they didn't know was that this man once served in Afghanistan. He had 117 confirmed kills with nothing but a sniper rifle. They called him the Ghost of Kandahar. What they didn't know was that they had just awakened a nightmare. The night was bitter. Wind sliced through the city like knives, and under that highway bridge, the man they called a vagrant didn't move. Not when the wind howled. Not when the rats scurried past. Not even when the cruiser headlights lit up his battered face. He looked like every other homeless man in this city. Blank eyes, skin weathered like old leather, the kind of man people pretend not to see. But those cops? They didn't just pretend. They pounced. "Get the hell up!" one barked, jabbing the man with his boot. No response. Another officer, young, buzz-cut, bloodthirsty, stepped in. "He's tweaking. Just beat the junkie down." And he did. The baton whistled through the air before it cracked against a rib. Once. Twice. Again. The man coughed. Blood. Then he whispered something no one expected. "Alpha 7. Alpha 7 Bravo." The cops froze. "What did you say?" the older one asked, uneasy now. But the man had curled back into silence. They didn't know what that meant. Not yet. They left him there, broken and bleeding. Just another cleanup in the forgotten parts of town. Just another night of no body cams. And who's gonna care? But as they drove away, the younger cop checked his dashcam, out of habit. It had caught the whole thing. And his stomach turned when he watched it back and caught the man's face in the glare of the streetlight. A scar. A long, jagged one, running from temple to jaw. He remembered that face. From a news article. A military profile. Major Elijah Cole. The Ghost. A man who had disappeared 5 years ago after an IED wiped out his entire unit in Kandahar. Presumed dead. But here he was. Under a bridge. And now he knew who they were. And they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. At 6:03 a.m., the precinct phone rang. Sergeant Willis, who'd been sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through divorce lawyers on his phone, answered with the usual grunt. "Downtown station talk." There was a pause on the line. Then a voice, smooth and low, but clipped like a blade. "This is Colonel Avery, Pentagon Operations. I need to speak to whoever filed the report on an incident under the I-95 overpass last night." Willis blinked. "Come again." The voice didn't repeat. It sharpened. "Do you have a report regarding an assault on a man matching the identity of Major Elijah Cole?" Willis's blood ran cold. The name. That name. There was a transient under the bridge, yes, but no formal ID. We logged it as routine." "Unlog it," the voice snapped. "That man is not a transient. He's classified Tier 1 Black under Operation Sable Phoenix. You and everyone involved in last night's incident are now under federal review." Willis stood up so fast he knocked over his coffee. Wait. What? Review? Sir, our officers didn't know." "You're not supposed to know," the voice said coldly. "That's the point. But now you do. And because of that, your entire chain of command will be interviewed within the hour. If Major Cole makes contact, you are not to detain him. You are to stand down and notify this line immediately." The call ended with a hard click. Willis stared at the receiver in his hand like it had just bitten him. By 7 a.m., Internal Affairs had rolled in. Black SUVs. Men with unreadable faces. The kind who never smiled. The kind who made even the dirtiest cop sit straight and silent. The officers from the night before, Martin and Russo, were pulled from patrol and escorted into separate rooms. No warning. No lawyers. Just questions. Fast. Precise. Unrelenting. Did he say anything else? What did you do when he didn't respond? Did he resist? Did you realize who he was? Martin, the younger cop, started to sweat. Russo stared at the floor. And then the playback was cued. The body cam they didn't know had synced back to the cruiser after all. Every hit, every insult, every breath that Major Elijah Cole whispered between cracked ribs. Alpha 7 Bravo. The room went silent. One of the federal agents leaned in. You two have no idea who you just beat half to death. Outside, the city woke up like nothing had happened. Traffic flowed. Kids went to school. People jogged with earbuds and overpriced coffee. But in the shadows of that police station, fear was blooming. Because somewhere out there, a ghost was walking again. And this time, he wasn't running. He was remembering. And he was coming back. By the time the sun hovered over the skyline like a bloodshot eye, Elijah Cole had made it to a motel 3 towns over. He moved like smoke, unseen, untouchable. The kind of man who vanished from surveillance cameras seconds before someone hit rewind. The kind of man who had once trained others to do exactly that. Inside room 214, he stood shirtless in front of the mirror, eyes locked on his reflection. His torso was a canvas of bruises. Purple, red, angry. A memory in technicolor. Each welt a badge from last night's encounter. Each cracked rib whispering the truth. They hadn't seen him. They hadn't seen the uniform etched into his spine. The decades of service buried in his silence. The man beneath the skin. He turned on the tap, letting cold water spill over his hands. It grounded him. Slowed the noise in his mind. Because beneath the calm, his thoughts were war drums. It wasn't the beating that haunted him. It was the look in their eyes. Casual. Disinterested. Like hurting him was paperwork. Like brutality had been rehearsed and he was just the next scene. No humanity. No hesitation. He'd faced enemies in war zones who looked him in the eye. Those cops didn't. They didn't see a man. They saw a silhouette to control. A knock on the door snapped him back. 3 taps. Then silence. Then one more. Elijah reached for the drawer. Not for a gun. For the coin. The one from the Pentagon. Black steel. Unmarked. Given only to Tier 1 operatives who had completed missions that weren't supposed to exist. He slid the coin into his palm and opened the door. Outside stood a woman in a military-grade windbreaker. Her hair pulled back, her eyes sharp behind mirrored shades. "Major Cole," she said, voice low. "It's time." He nodded. Not asking how she found him. Not asking who sent her. Because deep down, he already knew. Back at the station, Russo couldn't sleep. Guilt clung to his skin like static. Martin had shut down, stopped speaking after the feds showed the footage. But Russo remembered. The moment when Elijah had looked up, blood in his teeth, bones screaming, and whispered something they hadn't noticed at the time. "I trained your kind. Long before you wore a badge." It wasn't arrogance. It was a prophecy. And it was unfolding. Because now the Pentagon was involved. Phones were being confiscated. Files sealed. Words like containment and declassification floated through closed doors. And outside, the press still didn't know. But the city felt it. Something was changing. Elijah Cole was more than a man. He was a reckoning. And he had just begun to move. The courtroom was full, but silent. Cameras weren't allowed. Yet every phone buzzed with rumor. The name Elijah Cole had leaked overnight like gasoline through a cracked pipeline, one spark away from setting the country ablaze. On the judge's bench sat the Honorable Denise Franklin, known for her steel spine and refusal to play political games. She tapped her gavel once. The crowd exhaled. The doors opened. And Elijah walked in. Not with cuffs. Not with shame. But with poise. He wore a dark navy suit, military cut, pressed so clean it looked surgical. A single row of ribbons pinned to the lapel. Not enough to brag. Just enough to warn. He didn't glance sideways. Not at the reporters whispering. Not at the prosecutor biting his lip. Not even at the 2 officers in the back row, Russo and Martin, sinking into their seats like guilty shadows. Instead, he looked only at the judge. She looked back. And for a second, the room tilted. Because Denise Franklin knew exactly who Elijah Cole was. In 2003, she had prosecuted a case involving a rogue intelligence unit overseas. All evidence vanished. Witnesses relocated. But one name had popped up, only once, in a classified sidebar. E. Cole, Clearance Sigma Black. She had never forgotten. Now he stood in front of her, not as a ghost, but as a man, and as a mirror, reflecting a system too arrogant to admit it was broken. "What are the charges?" she asked. The DA cleared his throat. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer." She held up a hand. "To be clear," she interrupted, "this is a man who was thrown to the ground in a public courthouse, by officers unable to identify his status, despite full cooperation." A murmur rippled through the room. "Your Honor," the DA tried again. She leaned forward. Dangerous. Are you asking me to prosecute a decorated Black Ops officer, beaten without cause, based on the word of two patrolmen who didn't even run a background check?" Silence. Elijah didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, it wasn't just about him. It was about every quiet injustice swept under courtroom rugs. Every black man told to watch his tone, while bleeding on marble floors. Every woman who got her head shaved in shackles and then stood up, one day, wearing robes. Justice didn't blink. This time, the system did. Outside, the press finally got wind of it. Not just another viral moment. Not just another hashtag. A story. A symbol. Elijah Cole walked out of the courthouse as a free man. Not because he demanded it, but because the truth left no other option. And across the nation, in police departments and judges' chambers and military halls, one question echoed like a shot in the dark. What happens when the men you trained become the men you fear? Elijah didn't speak to the reporters. Not even a look. He stepped down the courthouse stairs like a man who'd walked this path before, under sniper sights, in foreign cities, in lands where justice was never promised. Behind him, Judge Franklin stood still at her bench long after court adjourned. The DA had already left, red-faced and rattled. Officer Russo avoided eye contact. Martin pretended to check his phone. Everyone else watched Elijah's back as if it were the final frame of a movie that would haunt them. But the real reckoning hadn't even started. Not until the phone rang. It was an encrypted line, one Elijah hadn't used since Kandahar. The ringtone was a soft chime, almost meditative. But for those who knew, it meant something had shifted at the highest level. He answered without a word. A voice spoke. Precise. Familiar. You made the whole room blink. Elijah remained silent. They sent you in. We didn't know until the feed hit our side. Still nothing. I need you to understand something, Elijah. This wasn't just local police. This wasn't just one courthouse. This was a test. Someone high up wanted to see what would happen when the machine eats its own. Finally, Elijah spoke. One word. Why? There was a pause on the line. Then, the voice answered, slow and deliberate. Because if they can humiliate someone like you in broad daylight and get away with it, then there's no ceiling left. No protection. No consequence. It was a probe. They were looking for weakness. Elijah's jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the street. He noticed a black SUV idling 2 blocks down. Unmarked. Standard DC shadow. The voice continued. We pulled footage. We've seen the reports. What happened wasn't accidental. It was surgical. But here's the twist. Another pause. You weren't the target. The judge was. That hit harder than any punch. Elijah turned his eyes back to the courthouse doors. Franklin had taken risks. Subtle ones. Deliberate ones. And now, her name would be on someone's list. They know she saw your name in that 2003 case. They know she never spoke of it. They think she'll flip now. Elijah's voice dropped, dark and steady. She won't. We're counting on that, the voice said. But they are too. Which is why we need to move. Elijah looked up. The sky was clear, but the air felt heavier. Where to? Where it all started. Langley. Click. The line went dead. And in that moment, Elijah Cole realized, this wasn't over. This wasn't even personal anymore. This was about a machine so old and so powerful, it no longer remembered who built it, or who it was supposed to protect. But Elijah remembered, and he was done waiting.